Hey, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Curves Welcome, a podcast about facing and embracing the curves of life. If this is your first time tuning in, this is Susie Carr. Hello and welcome to Curves Welcome podcast. I'm so happy to have my special guest speaker with me today, Brenda Murphy. Brenda Murphy writes fiction and short fiction and novels. Her novel Double Six won the 2020 GCLS Goldie for erotica. Woo-hoo-hoo! She loves tattoos and sideshows, and yes, those are her monkeys. When she's not loitering at her local library and writing, she wrangles two kids, one dog and an unrepentant parrot. Parrot, huh? She reviews books, blogs about life as a writer and ADHD, and publishes photographs on her blog at Writing While Distracted. I will be linking to that in the show notes, so check out her website. It's awesome. I read her blog. It's fantastic. And I will also put her social media links in there and all ways to contact her. Brenda, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. It'll be a fun conversation.
Oh, I think it will. Absolutely. So I met you in person for the first time at a GCLS conference in Pittsburgh, I believe it was.
Yeah,
right?
it was Pittsburgh. That's when we first met. We had, I think we had interacted through the Convergence. You were part of the membership drive and stuff like that, but I met you live and in person, and that was a lot of fun. And I can't wait till we can all do that again, because that was such a great thing.
It was the last time that we actually had an in-person conference,
right
before COVID hit. So, what I remember the most, this might not be the most pleasant memory because it was kind of scary and traumatic for me for just a split second, but you were there to help me. I just remember somebody got hurt. They tripped and there was blood.
Yes.
Person is fine. The person is absolutely fine. But totally at the moment, fine. I'm not a good person when it comes to traumatic events. And you and I were having a great conversation about writing and life. And all of a sudden somebody came running over to me because I'm a director of membership. And they were like, Susie, somebody is hurt. We need to do something. What do we do? And I froze and panicked, and you just jumped into action.
I
was so
that
happy.
Nursing, I'm a nurse, a registered nurse. I worked in hospitals for like 33 years, and I left hospital nursing a couple of years ago. And basically, I don't know, it's weird to say retired, but I stepped away from that. And my kids, I have two kids with special needs. So I basically, somebody needed to be home and coordinate all of the things. And so that became my role, because it's a lot easier if that's what you're used to doing, to coordinate all of the things. So yeah, but that training never goes away. It's always just part of it.
It's one of those things, probably like riding a bicycle. You remember, you react.
Right. Or racehorses. I always say we're like, when they set the bell off and you go bolting out of the gate, that's how most of us are, that if you've, I have this theory that certain areas of nursing really attract adrenaline junkies. And I would totally describe myself as stuff. And I worked as a labor and delivery nurse, where you can go from, oh, things are great, this is fine, we're having a baby, to just craziness in a matter of seconds. Some people who have had kids would tell you it's all craziness after that too. But it was the most amazing place to work. I only had, nobody ever likes to go to their job 100% of the time, but I would say I like to go to my job 98% of the time. Like, it was
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing, because
it is.
You're right.
Everybody has days you go, oh, I can't believe I have to go to work again.
I got to get up.
Right. But then I worked nights because I hated to get up in the morning. So I worked nights for years because I don't sleep well. I figured I might as well get paid for it. But the biggest thing was, even on those days where we're like, oh, I can't believe I have to go to work, I would get there and I would be with my friends, and then it would be fine.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't, you were so busy, you didn't mind it. And then you get to go home.
So here you were, you sound like you were in your glory at the time. And this kind of segues into the conversation that what we're here to talk about today, which is being a problem solver. Now, I know there's like a whole science and art behind solving problems. And I admittedly have not always been the best problem solver, However, I do believe it is something that we can all learn, because I have learned how to become a better one over time by dealing with things.
Right.
I think that is the only way you can actually learn a skill effectively, I'll say, is by doing. And every single person on the planet is faced with problems. Nobody is immune to problems. And it's really how we attend to them and how we focus on them. That's really going to determine the outcome of being able to solve them, or sometimes just have to, you just deal with them, and either you survive, you thrive, or you just become defeated. And I don't know about everybody else listening here, but I don't like to be defeated.
Right.
I
Right.
really don't.
And,
So
and you're exactly right. I mean, it is something that can be learned. And I think most people that work in healthcare, people come to us because they have problems, right? I mean, that's usually why you show up. And I always said labor and delivery was fun to work in because their problem was they were pregnant and we could fix that. Right.
yes,
You know,
yes.
you want to have a baby. We want you to have your baby. That worked out really well. Right. But, moving from that to life in general, you know, and you touched upon, situations. And I always say the biggest thing you have to do is get clear. Is this a problem that you actually have some control over? Because there are a lot of things that are a problem that it doesn't matter how hard you work at it, you're not going to be able to solve it because it's not within your sphere of control. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if it's something like that, then that to me, I label as situation.
Mm.
And situations you either decide to deal with or walk away. If you can't control it, you either got to deal with it or walk away. And that's the very first thing. If you're going to learn to solve a problem, is it really a problem or is it a situation?
Oh, that's a good
And
point.
and once you figure that out, okay, so this is something I can control and do something about.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get clear about that part, is it a problem or situation? The next thing you have to be clear about, and I made some notes because I actually do have a system. And it'll probably sound like a long drawn out system, but it's not. I mean,
Chunk it down for us. Chunk it down.
right. I'm going to chunk it down because, you get clear problem,
Well, let me ask you something though.
sure.
Before we actually get into the whole system of problem solving,
Yeah.
I really can't wait to dig into your brain on this one, because I saw it firsthand, like you in action that day. I'm like, she is a problem solver. She just calmed everybody down and solved all these issues for us. And you were in complete control over a situation that it deemed somebody taking control, and you did. So that is what I took away from that situation. And I'm so glad to have you here talking about problem solving for that reason. But what is one of the first things that comes to your mind when you think of the word problem in the context of someone's life?
Yeah. The very first thing I always think about is that, where the person is. Like if someone comes to me and says, I have a problem, and people do. And I always say, so what do you see as a problem? And then I always ask, do you want comfort or advice? Because I read that somewhere and that solves a lot of conflict. Because
Yes.
some people just want to talk to you
God, yes, it's so
about the
true.
situation and they don't want your advice. And that's
Yes.
fine. Because if you just need to talk to me for me to listen so that you can think out loud and sort through, or me to just say, gosh, that is terrible. You're right. That is a problem. What are you going to do about it?
Oh,
Or have you
I
thought about it? Or what's your
love that.
plan? That's a different conversation. But if you come to me like, geez, I don't know what to do about this. What do you think I should do about this? Then I know you're asking for me to offer some wisdom if I have it. And sometimes I don't. I'm like, damn, I don't know what I'd do either. And then we both sit down and talk about it. Like, okay, so what do you have? But that's the first thing I think of is like, okay, do they want to just tell me the problem and have me be comforting and a friend and listen? Or do they actually want my advice? So that's the very first thing I think of when someone talks about a problem.
I love that, because I think that's the major a major pain point in conversations between friends, spouses, parents and children. It's that not understanding what the person's expectations and needs actually are in a situation like that, because sometimes you're right, we just want to vent. But how does the person on the receiving end understand that unless we say something or unless they've asked? And so that is a whole different, it can take the conversation in a completely different direction. So I so appreciate you mentioning that. It's really
Right.
important point.
And I think with spouses, like within a relationship with couples, especially, because, your partner may come home and they're like, you know, elevated, really jacked up because something crazy went on at work. And you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And they may just want to talk about it and vent about it and have you say, you're right. And they were wrong. Or, yeah, I don't know, or something, be comforting in that moment. Or they may just say, what would you do? And then like it's a totally different conversation. And I think it's
Absolutely.
more respect. I mean, it's a respectful thing to do in any relationship, to find out they're opening up to you. There's a lot of people letting you in if they're going to share what their problems are, because we live in a society where 9 times out of 10, unless you're close to someone and you say, how are you doing? The first response that everyone's going to give you is, I'm just fine. And sometimes you
Yes.
look at people and they're not fine, but that is always my clue to, okay, you don't want to tell me what's going on, and that's okay too. It's your business.
Right.
But, I love those people that go, I don't know where I am right now, or I'm sort of okay, but I got this thing going on. And if you're close enough to talk about it, like, okay, so do you want to talk or not? And sometimes, sometimes if I got stuff going on, I'm thinking it through. I don't want to talk to anybody because I'm still
Absolutely.
thinking it through.
Right. And that's a very important process. It really is. So I want to speak about process for a second here. What I'd like to ask you is if you can give us an example of a problem that you solved and then as a result of solving that problem, you grew out of that. Can you give us an example of that, just to kind of give a little context to our conversation today? To first of all, let people know that everybody, we all have problems.
Oh my
But
gosh,
I
yeah.
also like to be able to give an example so people understand that having a problem isn't the end of the world. It's actually an opportunity to grow. And I cite that all the time. Whenever there's a difficulty in life, a challenge, where there's a solution that's needed and there's a solution, you have control over creating that solution out of dealing with the problem, then that's just a great and empowering feeling to be able to know that at the other end of this problem, there is some sunlight that you're going to see eventually.
Right. And I would say this last year has tested everyone's problem solving abilities. I went from having between 6 and 8 hours a day to work on my writing business, to create, to have that time to do all of the things that I was, and had worked towards doing, because, I had been home with the kids. Uh, and even when they were little, I mean, they were only in school, like even in preschool, they were only in school like 2 hours and 45 minutes a day. And I got work done during that time. But if you have, toddler twins running around, you're just not going to get a lot done that has to do with creative and focus and things like that. By the time they get to like school, where you drop them off at like say 9 o'clock and you don't have to get them again until 3:30, that was just like a miracle. I had time to create, I had time to write, I had time to really get immersed into my creative things and work on the business and things like that. All well and good. My kids came home on a Friday and never went back to school, right? So, you're home. And that first part of the end of last year, a lot of our problem solving revolved around not just technological issues, which is what I think a lot of parents were dealing with, and a lot of teachers trying to figure out how to do this. I said my kids are special needs. So my daughter is on the autism spectrum and my son has ADHD. So, and I have ADHD too. So, and I always say there's no one neurotypical in our household. I mean, we deal with a lot of stuff. Trying to work out how to have both of them have what they needed to finish out the school year, to also, I had a book under contract and another project I was worried. So I have 2 projects I need to finish, which in the world that I was in, that would have been fine. It would have been a breeze. Fine, cranking out 2K a day, getting all this stuff done, get my edits in, everything else. So now I'm like, okay, what do I got to do here? And the first thing I figured out was what's in my control. Well, what's in my control is me. Because the first thing I'm going to tell you about kids is like kids are not within your control. I don't care what anybody else tells you. My grandma used to say raising kids was like making a cake. You put all the ingredients in and you put it in the oven and you pray no one slams the door. Okay. So if you bake cakes, what happens when you slam the door is they fall. So that's like my grandmother's, what happens with cakes.
That's the problem with my baking. Okay.
Right.
I digress.
Slamming the door. If you got like banging and going around, your cakes are going to fall. My grandma made the best cakes. It was awesome. But so I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do here? And, prioritize, the kids were first priority because, I'm a grown up and I can get my stuff done around them, but they don't have the same abilities. They don't have the same knowledge and experience, everything else. So I got them sorted out with their tech, but then I'm so busy being their tech support. When the heck am I supposed to do my work? Well, I went back to what I knew, which is I started writing my blog when my kids were toddlers, which means I had 2 hours and 45 minutes when they went to preschool to do my work. And I had to shut off everything else, like in my brain that said, oh, you should take your time and do this. Like if there were dishes that needed to be done or vacuuming or laundry or whatever else, I had to basically put myself in a bubble, put blinders on and say, no, this is the only time. Because you can do dishes with kids around and you can do laundry with kids around and you can vacuum with kids around. In fact, they should help you do all that stuff. So remembering that, I'm like, okay, because I was really overwhelmed. I was feeling really defeated. I was like, oh, I just got there and it felt like the rug was snatched right out from under me. And I remembered I wrote 4 books in 2 hours and 45 minutes a day. And if I could write 4 books in 2 hours and 45 minutes a day, then I could get done this novella, this 30K novella that I owed, and I could finish this book that I was like 2/3 of the way through. I could do that. And I had to fall back onto what I knew. So I just got up earlier because I could control me. I couldn't control anything else in that moment. We really couldn't control anything at the beginning of this because nobody knew what was going on. I just knew my kids didn't have school. And that was the biggest thing. Like my kids are home and they're going to do school at home and I have to find my time to do my time.
Yeah.
My creative time is in the morning. That's like when I'm really on. Although last night I had a scene in my head for a book that I've already turned in. So I hope my editor doesn't hear this, but I'll have to slip it in later. And I was like, oh, I had this other scene. And all this sorry. But I sat on the couch in the midst of my daughter doing Lego. My son was watching some crazy, I don't even know what, on the television. And I sat down and wrote like a 500-word scene because it was there and I had to do it. It was
there and you had the times. So what I'm hearing from you is it's really a matter of developing. First of all, first step is understanding, is this something I can control? If the answer to that is no, then well, deal with it or walk away from it. In your case, you can't just walk away from certain things,
right?
People or anybody, circumstances in life. But if the answer to that question is yes, this is within my control, then the next step, it sounded like you did, was you sort of set priorities in your head. You started going through the problem solving mechanism of, okay, what can I do? Okay, this worked before in the past. So chances are it's going to work again if I apply the same principle now. So it's finding things that were successful in your life at one point and applying them to your current situation. And so it's really finding these tools that are out there for yourself.
Right. Sorting through your toolbox. And that's part of like the whole process. And I always say that, problems usually come down to like 4 things: time, money, space, or yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much life in general. If you got time to do something, if you have space to do something, if you have money to do something, if you have, what you need in yourself, whether that be knowledge, tools, discipline. I mean, those things that you have in yourself and knowing being able to look back at what you've accomplished. And I always say that when you start feeling defeated about a problem, you really need to like step back and look at what you've accomplished. You know, I keep a little bookshelf that has hard copies of my books on those. And those days that I sit down and I look at the screen and I go, oh my God, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Why did I ever think that I could write a book? I get up and I go look at those books. I'm like, well, okay, so I've written this many books. I know how to do this, because I swear every time you open up a document to start again, you're like, how do I do this again?
I know.
But right? But then you're like, okay, I do know how to do this. I do
Yes.
know how to do this. I've done it. So I think that just having visual reminders of things that you've accomplished, just having even friends that you remember, we did this together. Say you wanted to, I've had friends that have gone on the Appalachian Trail and hiked the entire thing, or they've done some major milestone in their life, ran a marathon, did a triathlon or whatever. I worked with a woman who had run the Marine Corps marathon, who carried the medal in her backpack. And she would just say, want to see my medal? Because she had to remember that.
It's taking that inventory of your wins. And I want to say to those listeners who are sitting there saying to themselves right now, I don't have it in me to run a marathon. I don't have it in me to write a book. I've never done anything that monumentous in my life. These wins that we're talking about also refer to, have you made someone smile today? You can control that. Well, you can control creating that action that could potentially make someone smile. You can spread that cheer, and that's monumentous in itself too. So
right, it's the other little things. Are my kids, did my kids have a good day? I mean, that was really hard at the beginning of this, because they missed their friends, they missed their routine, they were really frustrated with the technology. Were there little things that I could do? Like if my kids were okay at the end of the day, I felt like I had accomplished a lot. Little things like, did I rescue a dog? Things that you've done in your past. Did I grow a plant? I mean,
yes,
there
I mean, it's taking those wins and understanding that was you solving a problem.
right.
I have a plant. I have a plant in my living room right now that it's a bamboo, and this thing at one point when I first got it was beautiful. It thrived, and then I pretty much killed it. I don't know what happened. It just sort of like
Did you put it in the window? Does it get more sun now?
Now it does.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to nurse it. I talk to it. I
move it away from the light. Like they like shade, like bamboo like shade.
Yeah.
Because we had a bamboo plant on the side of the house, and then the city went through and cut down a bunch of trees. And like everything that I had over there in that window that enjoyed the shaded light, I had to find a new window for.
Well, I will do that. I will move that bamboo after this.
They love bathrooms.
It's not direct sunlight, but it does get sun. So
yeah, they love bathrooms.
Yeah. Well, maybe it'll be in my bathroom. And
there you go.
Bamboo is very good luck. So anyway, my whole point of saying that is I have these plants though that I have brought back from the dead. Like literally they were brought back from the dead, and somehow I have a whole kitchen window and it's full of house plants that I brought back from the dead. So if I ever have a moment in my life where I say I don't matter, nothing, what have I ever really done, whatever, I can look and say those plants they're alive because I've nurtured them, and if I weren't here nurturing them, they'd be dead. So it's all relative to how you view the world.
Right.
So moving on though, let's
sure.
What do you think somebody risks when they choose to not face the problems head on, the ones that they can control?
Yeah, problems you don't face have a really bad habit of snowballing, I think, for one thing, if you don't address an issue. The other thing is I think it really contributes to that, and you've touched on this, that feeling of being defeated. Like the feeling, and I had made some notes about that too, because like things that I wanted to remember, that you risk that feeling of not accomplishing things, you're just like, and you get stuck. That feeling of being mired in problems, because a lot of times if you don't address one problem, then it can snowball into like a bigger problem, but it can also have this cascade effect to other problems. And I liken it to like, if you have a leak in your roof, ignoring the leak is not going to make it go away.
Mm.
And you're going to end up having to replace probably a ceiling and the rest of your roof.
Mm.
A leak under your cabinet, if you don't address the leak under your cabinet, it's going to rot your floorboard. So I always feel like if you don't address those little leaks, those little problems, when they, whatever size they come to you, if you don't address a problem, it's not going to go away. And again, this is a problem versus a situation.
Yes.
You can't fix other people. And if people don't take anything else away from this, like if part of your problem is an interaction with someone else in your life, you can only control your part of that equation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You can't control them. If they have their own things that they're doing or issues or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have that. And what you can only bring your part of it to that. And there's a lot of wisdom in knowing, okay, I've done as much as this is as far as I'm going, those boundaries. Like I'm here, this is what I'm going to do. You do your thing, but this is what I'm going to do. And I'm happy with that ethically, interpersonally, whatever. That's what I've got.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of that, but not dealing with situations and not dealing with problems. You just end up feeling stuck and defeated.
Yes.
And unhappy.
And that's never a good place to feel.
And frustrated.
I think we've all been there. I know
Right.
that I have let problems in my mind just slide by thinking I'll just deal with this later. And then all of a sudden I look over my shoulder and I'm like, oh my God, that just grew overnight. How did that happen? Well,
Right.
when you ignore things that you can control, that you have a control over, your action or inaction in some cases can make a problem worse by ignoring that leak under the kitchen faucet, which I have done before.
I don't really know anybody who has not ignored a leak.
Okay, like, or a little sound that you're like, I know that's not normal.
Right. Or that sound in your car. Like you'll hear that little sound in your car and you're like, oh, turn up the radio.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. There are all sorts of little things, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have problems with my deck right now. Like I know that we need to replace the side rails because I look at it and I'm like, that needs to be replaced, but I'll wait. And so I've waited through the winter and now I'm like, oh my God, it's ready to fall down. I probably should have done it sooner. Those little things. But let's talk about, the problems can be grand in scale or small in scale. Problems to people, it's relative how they feel about them. But
Exactly.
A problem is a problem. So my next question to you is, can you share with us some practical tips on ways a person can systematically solve a problem? Because I do believe if people have a process or a system in place, then they feel more empowered to be able to actually take action on it. At least that's how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to build something, say I get something from the store, IKEA. I just got something actually, a futon bed, and I had
Good luck.
I spent the whole day yesterday. Didn't know, but it's a matter of systematically having a process to be able to say, okay, I'm going to get from point A, which is everything in a box and like really overwhelming looking, to point B. I have a futon that I could, somebody could sleep on now. To get from that point to that point takes a process, typically, for you to be successful and feel your way through it. Same thing with a problem. And I feel like you can empower people if you do have that process. So what is yours?
So exactly. So the process, and of course, because I flipped my pages over, is we talked about get clear about whether it's a problem or a situation. Get clear about whether it's time, it's money, it's space, it's yourself. What is it that is the problem? Environment, those are just some examples. Like, what is the problem? Get clear about that. And is it in your control? That's the next thing you look at. It's like, so is this something I can control? If you live in an apartment and you've got a leak under the sink, that's a call to the landlord, right? If you're renting, that's a call to the landlord. If you live in a house and it's a leak under the sink, that's a call to the plumber and scheduling time for them to come out and having the money to pay for it. Like, so it's like or trying to fix it yourself, finding a YouTube video and seeing whether or not this falls within your wheelhouse of ability. And we all have different things like that. I mean, that's the first thing I do for any repair. Um, I have a very large skill set when it comes to repairs and home improvement and stuff like that. I'm like, the house we're in, I did 90% of the renovation myself. So I have a very large wheelhouse. I also can do small engine repair. I'm like, I can do things. However, there are things that I know that I could do, that it will be, to solve a problem, that it's better for me to take it to someone that does that professionally all the time. So get clear about that. Does this fall in your wheel? If it has to do with something you can take care of, is it really something you want to get involved in? And the best thing about YouTube, there are thousands of videos which will show you how to fix things. If you have to, fix whatever and you want to take a stab at it, you can find a video that will help you how to do something. If you have the tools and the time and the willingness,
Yes,
whatever.
absolutely.
Okay, so that's one kind of problem. The other step is, I'm a firm believer in lists. What do you have? What things do I have to fix this problem? What things do I need to fix this problem? What things do I need to do to fix this problem? And then there's what my favorite one is, brainstorming all the different ways you could potentially address a problem. Because, it may be that first idea of like what's going to work doesn't work. And I think that if you have kids in general, or you have pets, there are pets that, what would fix some behavior that you're not happy with. I had at the time, my dogs were young. They're like medium-sized dogs. They're little Keeshonds. They're not huge dogs, but I found out that a regulation baby gate with 2 Keeshonds is absolutely worthless, because I had those little pop-in gates, right? Because my problem was they were getting out in the house and chewing the living hell out of everything. I mean, they chew like beavers. I mean, I don't mean to just like chew up a shoe. I'm talking about chewing up woodwork
Oh my
or
gosh.
door frames. I
Hmm.
mean, it's crazy. And they chew for about cabinets. They chew for about 2 years, right? I finally resorted to a dog gate that you could use for German Shepherds, or anything huge, right? Any Great Dane sized dog gate that I had to install to keep these 2 small dogs in my kitchen. I found out that was like, but my first idea was to use the baby gate. Test your ideas. Is this going to work? Is this not going to, test your ideas.
Test your
What do you
ideas.
have?
I
I
love
mean, I
that.
was lucky. I put out a call from all my friends, like, hey, does anybody have any baby gates they're done with? There were a ton of baby gates people had. Some of them even came with little teeth marks from their puppies, which my puppies promptly chewed through. Chewed the wood, like those little wooden ones. So, I mean, that's just an example. Like, what do you have? What do you need? Try everything. Don't take anything off the table, even if it seems like an extreme thing. Well, let's see if this works. Will this work?
That's the whole glory of, that's the glory of brainstorming, is every idea is good until proven otherwise.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And even if it sounds like something that might be hard to do, like getting up earlier to get your stuff done before everybody else comes into play. I mean, we're homeschooling now. My kids aren't ready to start school till like 10 o'clock. That's brilliant, because now I don't even have to get up at the crack of dawn to get my 2.5 hours in. I can get up at 7, which is my preferred time, and get my time in, and then still be ready for them. And the key thing about this,
2:30 a.m. here, 2:30.
2:30 a.m. Yeah,
It's
you and my
my-
wife should she's up really early like that.
I get it all done by 5 a.m.
Yep. She is a very early riser. She gets up, she gets stuff done, she does her thing. And that's, you have to work with you too. Like there are people that stay up I know a lot of people with kids that write, that stay up really late to get their work done, because they wait till the kids go to bed. And then, and I've done that too. I mean, there were times when I was doing NaNoWriMo when they were little, the National Novel Writing Month, where you commit to the insanity of writing a 50,000 word novel, which I want you to know, double six was my
Insanity.
NaNoWriMo project.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a couple of books like that. Used to be how I would sneak in an extra book a year.
Ooh,
Like, cause my
that's
goal was always 2 books a
powerful.
year. So I would like do a book in like from the kids' time when kids went back to school. So like August, October. And then I would always go to the Surrey International Writers Conference. So my deadline would be to get that finished before I went to conference. That was like my reward, was to go to the conference and hang out with my friends and be crazy in Vancouver. Um, and then I would come back and I would do NaNoWriMo, and then I would go back and edit the first book. So like I could get my 2 books in per year. I didn't do it this last year because I sat down, I wrote a blog post about it. Like I was not in a place where words were flowing freely. They were coming out like sludge, but they were coming out. And, it's that not giving up. That's the other part of problem solving. Just because the first solution didn't work, you don't just walk away, because you can't ignore it. Say you tried to fix the pipes under the sink and it lasted for 2 days. And then whatever your repair was, that gum and tape that you put on there didn't work. And now it's leaking again.
I'm so glad you went there with this,
Right.
because it's such,
Right.
that is so important that
Right.
if the gum and the tape don't work,
Yeah. Move on.
maybe it's time to up the game to like a YouTube video that shares other ideas, or a
Right.
plumber.
Right.
But yes, it's important to like be flexible and not beat yourself up if
And
something that you've tried doesn't
research.
work, because it's not always gonna work on the
Right.
first
And
try.
research. There are tons
It's
and tons
okay.
and tons of people out there. You are not the only person who's ever dealt with a situation. There are podcasts like this. There are YouTube videos. There are blog posts. If you put in whatever your problem is, I guarantee you will get some kind of hits. Some of the solutions may seem absolutely insane. And I have read some of those solutions and wonder what planet or what kind of bank account those people have, because that's the other thing. We all come from a different budgetary place. So, I always say there's the 10-cent solution and the $10 solution, and then the $100 solution, and then the $10,000 solution to a problem. And I usually start at the low end, because that's where I think you should start, is the low end. That's just how I roll. But sometimes I look at that, like I had to tear up, as part of renovating this house, I I had the people come in to give me an estimate for the floor in the kitchen, because I needed to replace. The guy who lived here was like a 2-pack a day smoker, and everything reeked, right? And the floor was even stained yellow plus it was really old, probably 1950s kind of floor. Got to rip everything up, right? The guy comes to give me an estimate, and he can give me an estimate on the vinyl, but he can't give me an estimate on the demolition. And I'm like, what? And he goes, well, I don't know how long it's going to take him to tear the floor up. And then he tells me the estimate for that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to tear this floor up, and I'll call you to come back and do the underlayment and do the floor. Right. So
Problem
I've never
solved.
torn a floor up. I don't know, but I know I don't want to pay this guy to tear the floor up, because it was going to be expensive,
It can be fun as all hell to tear up a floor. If you
you know
have some
what?
frustrations in your back pocket and you need to get rid of them, tearing up a floor is
It was
one
the
of the
best.
best ways.
And
Yeah.
and my total cost, besides my time, was the 30 minutes. I went through YouTube and I found a bunch of different videos, because I hadn't rented a dumpster either. So, and I needed it to be in manageable chunks for me. And, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I'm like, okay, I know how to do this now. I already owned a circular saw, which was a key part of like cutting it into squares that were manageable. So that was easy. I already owned that, but I didn't own good knee pads. I needed a pry bar, and I needed one of those little staple pullers. And all of that cost me like $100.
The staple pullers. Oh, I'm sorry, but you just gave me flashbacks, traumatic
right?
flashbacks.
Crawling around on my hands and knees. I'm not sure what's up with people and staple guns.
Oh my
But
gosh. They love them.
There was one spot in the kitchen where I swear there were 50 staples in like a 12 by 12 foot. I don't know what happened there. It's like, because most of the time it was pretty, it made sense. They're here and here and here to hold it down. I'm thinking, dude, whoever that did this, there were appliances on top of this plywood. It wasn't going anywhere. What in the world?
I've cursed out quite a few people who I have no idea who they were because of those staples.
But yeah,
Anyway.
so that was the $100 solution. to what was like a 2,500 3K quote for demolition. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. But I knew myself well enough to know that I had the ability and the time and the skill set to do it. So that's the other part of problem solving. You can get really overwhelmed when you look at all the different solutions. So make a list of those things too. I'm all about lists because lists help you get clear. Whether you write them out by hand, I'm a big fan of handwriting because I think that you think differently that way.
Yes.
Put them on a computer, put them in a spreadsheet, whatever works for you. Talk about the solutions. That's the other part. And if you come up with a solution, it seems like it's kind of iffy. Talk it over with somebody you trust, somebody that you know. Yep. And I always say, talk it over with a neutral party, someone who doesn't have an investment, whether or not you do X. I used to go down when you could go down to this tea house, coffee house, and, here in town. And there's a couple of guys that it was like all guys that were retired that I was friends with. And what I loved about being friends with them is if I had something I needed to talk over, they had no investment in what my solution was.
Right.
As opposed to your partner sometimes may want to micromanage your investment, or they don't want you to get hurt, or they're fearful, or they're worried about your time commitment or whatever, versus these people who, I don't want to say they're random because they're friends, but they're not invested in what you do as a solution to your problem.
Oh, that's a really great point. Seeking the counsel of outside sources who have an unbiased, objective.
Yeah. Like they don't care. They don't have to live with you. They don't have to live with your house if
the problem or the issue if the problem isn't solved. Or it's not going to affect them one way or the other. If you solve it or don't solve it or solve it a certain way.
Exactly. It's like, I always call that the barbershop or the coffee shop Congress. You go and I'm like, what do you think? It was like, what would you do? Whatever. I'm thinking about doing this. Have you ever done that? Like, that's the other thing. When you get ready to do something that you haven't tried before as a solution to a problem, talk to people who've done it. If you can find those people, did that work for you? Getting your kids to sleep through the night. There are like thousands of people who tell you how to do that. I'm here to tell you that each child is individual, and what works for one family might work for your family, might not. But I will tell you what will not work: trying to force fit someone else's solution into your environment, your situation, your life. Just because 999 people did it this way, it may not work for you because your circumstances are different.
And don't feel like a failure because it didn't work for you and it worked for somebody else. It's a totally different situation, circumstance. So that's a really good point.
Don't feel defeated. Again, it comes back to don't feel defeated if the first thing doesn't work. A lot of really big problems, if it's a big problem, it may take a bunch of brainstorming. It may take a lot of work to keep trying different things. Well, that didn't come out. And I always say, like, I like to cook. I've taught cooking classes. I had a cooking blog for a while. And my thing is, it's like tweaking a recipe. Fixing a problem is like tweaking a recipe. It's like the first time I make something, I make it exactly like it's written. And then I go from there. Like, okay, did I like it? Did I not like it? Does it fit our palate? Or not, right? So you're gonna, do I need more of this or more of that, or take something out, or we don't have that ingredient, or we didn't like that ingredient, or whatever. Those little tweaks, like maybe your problem was solved 50%. What can I do to get it to 60%? Or what I can do to get it, and coming to the final part of it is, if you get to those unsolvable problems, you really have to back up off of that and say, okay, this isn't going to change. And if it's not going to change, we're back to it's a situation, and you either deal with it or you don't. You walk away from it or you don't. And again, you can't necessarily do that with people, but what you can do is decide how much time, effort, energy, all of those things, you can draw that boundary and say, okay, I can't do this anymore. Years ago, I had a friend who had a family member that routinely we would have to go pick up because they had overdrank. Right.
Yeah.
And and we had gone and gotten them like 5 or 6 times, and you get to that point to where, like, I'm glad you're safe. but I have to go to work in the morning,
Yeah.
right? And you're calling me at 3 a.m. from the bar on a work night. And so I need you to find something else to do. We wound up pre-programming, a cab into her phone. We wound up, I mean, besides strongly encouraging her to go for counseling. But again, I can't force anybody to do anything.
It's out of your control.
Right, out of my control. But I can make sure that you have a pre-programmed number in your phone. I can make sure that we have an account with the cab company, that you don't not take a cab because you don't have the cash. You
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
and we were privileged that we were able to do that and make that arrangement. Eventually they figured out that that was not a way to live your life, and got some help, which was like the positive part of that story. But drawing that line, like, I can't go into work where I have to make decisions where if I screw up, people could really get hurt or die or kill, because when you're a nurse, you have that responsibility. You have to be together when you get to work. You make
Right.
important decisions.
You need a clear head.
You need a clear head, right? Yeah. After the third or fourth time at 3 a.m., I'm like, time out. We got to come
Yeah.
up with something for this. So
Different solution.
a different solution. So again, situation versus problem, what you have, where you are, all of that. But that's kind of where I come from to solve problems.
This has been really great information. One thing that I just, from the conversation, one thing that I thought of too is the way we look at problems, like our mindset towards problems, can probably help us deal with them when they're in our control in a more effective way. And what I mean by that is, I always go back to that whole viewing everything through the lens of being a student of the universe, being curious about life. And so I take, for instance, that futon I had to put together in that big, huge package and all the tools and all the everything. And I thought, have a curious mind. Susie, look at this as you're curious about it. And it changes your mindset, puts you into a different a different state of mind. And I find that that's very helpful to be able to solve problems, because I don't put that stress on myself. Instead, I'm looking at it like, let's look at this as a game and be curious about it, that you'll learn something from this. And so that was one of my pieces of advice, I would say, to add to what you've already said, which is your pieces of advice were so helpful. And I really hope that everybody listening here, if you do have a problem, hopefully they're small problems, but regardless of their size, I hope that you take these tips and apply them. Try them, be flexible, be very patient with yourself, be kind to yourself. Life is hard enough on its own. Never mind putting that pressure on yourself to feel like you've failed at solving a problem.
Yeah, be kind. That is the
Right.
number one thing. Be kind to yourself. I mean, there are enough people in the world who may not be. So be kind to yourself.
Be kind.
That's the number one thing. And respect yourself. Respect your abilities. Be confident. Like you said, be a student in the universe. Be confident that you can solve things, because you got to where you are.
Yes.
You've survived so far. You have solved many other problems, and it may not seem like they were this big. It may seem like this is the biggest problem in the world. But you've got here, and you can keep being here. Be that student in the universe. Like you said, be curious, and you can do it. And I'm cheering for you, whatever your problem is. It's like I'm a big cheerleader. I'm always like, yes, you can do it.
Yes,
because
and
I do
that flows right from your energy, is you care about people. And so that's why I thought you were the perfect guest to bring on to talk about
thank you.
this, because it's such an important thing to talk about. So people have all these problems, they think they're so monumentous and they're going to crush them, and it's such a sad way to live. And I think that you offered a lot of help and a lot of hope for people in that respect. Now, as we close out today's episode, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about, share with us what's the title of your latest work in progress. So what's the latest book release, and where people can connect with you so that they can learn more about you.
Oh my gosh. Well, my website's pretty easy to find, but it's Brenda L Murphy. You have to make sure you put the L in there, because there's another Brenda Murphy that actually writes drama criticism. and is it like a tenured professor. And I always wonder, like, if people get to that website, they're like confused. But anyway, so it's BrendaLMurphy.com. So that's easy. And my next release with 9 Star Press is actually an anthology that I did with Megan Hart and Fiona Zed. And it's a paranormal, it's 3 paranormal stories. They're all like 3 paranormal novellas. We had a really good time doing it together. I'm friends with both of them. Fiona actually went to school with my wife, which is how I met her. And I met Megan at an RWA conference like a million years ago, it feels like now. But unbeknownst to both of them, they both really admired each other's work. So it was really fun putting everybody together. And that was a fun project. And it was like the perfect project for this time period. So it was very encouraging. So that'll be out in June. It's called Love, Blood, and Sanctuary. And it's got some great stories in it. The best part was being able to read their stories. So, well, that was cool. For my University Square series, the most recent release was Lockset. That was back in October, but the next book out, Bookends, will come, I believe September is my release date for that. At least that's the tentative release date from 9 Star Press right now. And that's the 3rd book in the University Square series. And I'm working on the 4th book, which I just got my characters nailed down this past couple of weeks. I took a couple of weeks off social media and just worked in the garden to let stuff bubble up, because that's usually where my happy place is, outside in the garden. But yeah, so I'm easy to find. You can find my readers group on Facebook. That's Writing Distracted Scurry, which is what you call a group of squirrels. And if you've followed any of my Writing Distracted blog, you'll know that I'm very squirrel-like in what's going on. And that's probably like my little power animal is squirrels, and turtles, squirrels and turtles, because any progress is progress.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, again, I've enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure listeners are enjoying it too. And go out there and fix your leaks, people. Fix your leaks. Trust me. If there's one takeaway from today's show, it's fix those leaks, no matter what they look like in this world. Thanks so much for being with us today, Brenda. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was just great. I love talking to you, and it's been fun.
Hey friends, thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If there is something you'd enjoy exploring in a future podcast, please reach out to me via my website at curveswelcome.com and I'll work it in. While you're there, grab a free story too. It's my way of thanking you for your support of my podcast and romance novels. Also, be sure to follow the Curves Welcome podcast channel to keep up on the latest episodes. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go out there and continue to learn, grow, and embrace life's curves.